Okay, my name's Perry Jones, and I live in Union Bridge. Matter of fact, I've lived right in the town of Union Bridge since 1970. Um, so I guess that's pretty much all my life. Before that, I was just about 2 miles outside of Union Bridge in the Frederick County side. So I still consider myself as being a longtime resident of Union Bridge because I've always lived so close to it.
Oh, great. What was it like growing up? Union Bridge is on the smaller town, not as big as, say, like a Baltimore City or Washington, D.C. What was it like growing up in a smaller town like that?
Well, I started working at the garage in Union Bridge that my father owned. I started working there when I was 13 years old, and at one time of day, I could tell you everybody that lived in town, what street they lived on, and where they lived and everything. And it's changed a little bit over the last few years. We are still the smallest town in Carroll County. It depends on when you take the census. One year we might be 990, and the next time we're 996. So we still haven't reached that 1,000 mark, but it's still a quiet little town, and it's everybody there treats you just like family. It's like if somebody has a problem, and everybody's there to help everybody out. So it's a real quaint little town.
So small town growing up. Do you have a lot of friends?
Yes, had a lot of friends growing up, and still have a lot of those same friends. We have people that I've grown up with ever since I was just a very young child in that town. And probably one of my oldest and dearest friends is a gentleman that lives at the Middleburg Nursing Home at this time. He just turned 103 years old, Clarence Singer. So there's a lot of good memories of Union Bridge. People, as used to be, people moved there, they stayed there all their life, and people worked at Lehigh, and you had the farming community and things like that. So everybody, it wasn't a lot of moving around from place to place.
Can you tell us about your family a little bit?
Okay, my mom and dad, like I say, I was born in a little town right inside of Frederick County, Johnsville, and my father was from right in Union Bridge, and he met my mom when he worked on a farm, and they got married. And I guess at that time, when I was born, we lived on that farm right outside of Johnsville in Frederick County, and lived there until I was about, I guess about 9 years old. We moved to Liberty Town, and my dad at that time started working at the garage in Union Bridge, commuting from Liberty Town back and forth. And I had two sisters and one other brother, and everybody kind of like stayed close to home, for a long time. We moved, like I say, in 1970 we moved to Union Bridge, and my sister worked, I guess, the sewing factory there at Union Bridge at the time. My brother and I worked at the garage, and then my younger sister was like 11 years younger. She was the youngest. So, everybody was there together. My dad, his name was Perry Jones Sr., and they called him Tuck, and he inherited that name from his grandfather. And so, like I said, that's where the Tuck Jones service station came from, the garage that we have. And my mom, she was a housewife and took care of the family and things like that. She also helped a lot of people in the community, and she still does. She's 71 years old. She'll be 72 this year. And she still goes out and helps people that are, needing someone to sit with them during the day or in the evening. She'll go out and sit with people, and always running somebody to the doctor and things like that, and back and forth. So, we're kind of community oriented. My dad and I were the first African Americans in Carroll County to join the volunteer fire company. We joined Union Bridge Fire Company in the fall of 1972, and I was very active in the fire company until 1980 when my dad passed away. And then by having the business, and I was asked at that time to get on the Union Bridge Town Council to fulfill an 11-month term that he had left in his term. Mm-hmm. And at that time I had to decide, did I want to keep active in the fire company because I had the business and doing work for the town, so I had to give something up. And at that time I kind of like, I still stayed a member of the fire company, but not active, helped at the carnival and things like that. So it was kind of like, it was something I really didn't want to do, but I had to decide on where I wanted to go, if you wanted to give 100% in something that you've done. And I felt at that time that the business needed my devoted, participation in the business. And then I was very active in the town of Union Bridge at that time when I got on the town council. So,
what kind of man was your father?
well, I think he was great. He was a guy that was probably about 5'8", 5'9", a little stocky guy, and he was meant a lot to me. He was always at the garage. He was sitting at his desk back there. If I run into a problem, I could ask him, and he tried to work things out. And a very understanding man. He back in, like I say, he worked at that garage in from early '64 or somewhere in that area until '68 when he bought the business for himself. And in May of 1968 is when he bought the business. And that was, about a month or so. It was the time that Martin Luther King was killed. And, for African American buying a business and going out on his own at that time, 1968, it took a lot of courage. And, and the courage he had, he was a gentleman that he's always drilled into my head and my brother's head and our whole family. And after he passed away, my mother's done the same thing. You never let anyone tell you can't do something, because when they tell you can't do it, that's when you have to prove to them that you can. So that's always kind of like stuck in the back of my mind, and that's what we've, always, that's one thing I remember about him. He was very understanding, very, what I thought when I was growing up. My parents were a little harsh at times, but I thank them for that. They didn't, we had rules that we had to follow. We had curfews that we had to follow. I was 18 years old, had my own car and everything, and I came home one night at 2 o'clock in the morning. My mom says, "Where were you?" And I said, I stopped at the fire hall and I was talking to some guys. She says, "Well, next week you can walk to the fire hall and talk to them because you're not moving your car." And I said, "Well, I said, that's my car. I pay rent. I paid insurance on that car. I paid for it." She says, "Yes, but you live under my roof." And that's the way things were. That was end of conversation. And nowadays, you look at the young kids, we have problems with children in Union Bridge at 12, 14 years old running up and down the streets 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that wouldn't have happened in my day. My parents wouldn't put up with that.
How do you have children yourself?
I have a son that's 26, just turned 26 years old. He lives in Tawnytown. He's married and has a son of his own that's 4 years old. So, it's kind of nice to see the way I grew up and to see the way children grew up today. And my son does a real good job with his son, so I'm proud of him for that.
That's wonderful. Did you take a lot from your parents in the way that you reared your child?
Well, I tried to raise him the way they raised me. Of course, things is a lot different today. Everybody, you always want your children to have more than what you had when you were growing up, and I tried doing that for him. And he's had a lot of difficulties. He's grown up with a lot of things. His mother and I separated and divorced when he was about 12, and then when he was, I guess, 20 years old, his mom passed away. And so he's grown up a lot in the last few years, and of course I've always been there for him, but he's a good, strong young man, and he's got a head on his shoulders, and one day he's one of those guys that somebody's gonna look back at him and say, you're the future of this world or this country, and he's gonna be one of those guys.
It's wonderful. It's amazing. What was it like being a single father and having responsibility when you were with your child? How did you accept that responsibility? Was that a difficult change to make in your life?
No, it wasn't that difficult. Like I say, his mom was still living until he was like 20, but so we had joint custody of him, and he, like I say, he was a good kid. He participated in a lot of activities in school and things like that, and he wanted to make sure his mom was taken care of, and he's always been out there. He was always a kid in the neighborhood that if there was another child that needed something, he was always really good with children, and so I didn't have a lot of problems with him growing up. I was very fortunate. He started out, he wanted to be a school teacher, and then he changed his mind and he got into a different career. But I wish he would have, because he's very good with children himself. So I think he made an excellent teacher.
What sort of career is he in now?
He's in the working for an alarm system company, putting alarms in new houses and things like that down through, well, all over Carroll County, Howard County, Anne Arundel, and he really enjoys doing that.
Backing up a little bit, growing up in Frederick County, then Carroll County, when you did, being African American, did you face challenges with that in a predominantly white area at the time?
Well, I think at the time, and probably the area that I grew up in was a lot better. Like I say, the Johnsville area, I mean, that was a quaint little town. It's about 3.5 miles outside of Union Bridge. And it's basically like Union Bridge. It's people that grew up in that town, lived there forever, and you know, you were basically family. So the object of growing up and color in that area did not mean anything. I mean, it was just like when you walked into somebody's house, you sat down and you ate, and that's who you were. You know, it wasn't a big difficulty there. And even when we moved to Union Bridge, it wasn't that much of a problem. Now I know when you get outside of some of the other areas of Carroll County and Frederick County, it was a big problem until, you know, like probably late 60s, early 70s. But I was just fortunate that my parents always lived in an area where we didn't have that problem.
How does that carry over to your later years when you started campaigning and becoming more of a public figure in politics?
Well, I don't think it actually ever made a difference. Like I say, my father passed away in 1980, and he had 11 months to go in his 4-year term. And the mayor and town council at that time asked me if I would, you know, finish the 11 months. So I thought about it, and I talked to the mayor and a couple of council people, and they said, we'd love to have you. And you know, so I finished that 11 months, and I figured this would be it. And I ended up running for re-election. Running for election that year, and I guess I ran for 3 elections and won 3 times. And then our mayor, that was Mr. Ed Willier, he was mayor of the town for like 33 years. He was ready to retire, and so I ran for mayor, and you know, eventually got that seat, and then ran for county commissioner. And it really has never made, at least I've never heard of it making a difference of color in Carroll County, you know, when I was running for office. Had some problems the last election down on Route 27 that, you know, some vandals vandalized one of my 4x8 signs, you know, with the N-word and things like that on the sign. But, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. You're going to have that. And, yeah, we changed the sign. We went on, you know, we had an election to run, and I don't think it ever made a difference. I never heard anybody made any derogatory remarks, you know, the whole time that I was, you know, toward me, you know, or my family while I was running for office.
Working in politics, how difficult is it to separate that business side of things, of this is the nature of the beast, and the personal feelings? Because I would imagine being faced with the derogatory comments on the sign, I mean, that would probably be pretty troubling. Personally, how do you find a way to keep those separated?
Well, I think you have to, you know, you have to be a strong-minded person, you know, have strong will, and, you know, you think of your friends that you have that are with you side by side, you know, that work with you day and night. And, you know, and I had that relationship with a lot of the people at the county office building that I worked with every day, and people all over Carroll County that called up and said, you know, we don't like this, we don't know what happened, and you know, you need help getting your sign down and putting a new sign up, we'll help you do that. And you know, just that relationship with people, you know, they really make you feel comfortable and at home. So I think that's one thing that helps you get along through this world.
So when your father passed away, you finished his term, which was 11 months?
11 months, yeah.
So the 11 months are up. What made you decide to keep going with it?
Well, I guess at that time, you know, 11 months, I liked what I was doing, and it really isn't enough time to really get your feet wet, you know. And I was kind of a new guy. I was the youngest person at that time that was ever on the Union Bridge Town Council, so I was, getting around the county, getting to meet a lot of different people, and getting into politics aspect. And it was, fortunately, a lot of the people that I was meeting when I first got on the town council, a lot of them were people that I've already met in the last several years through the volunteer fire company that were, played double roles in different aspects of their life. So I knew I've met a lot of these people over again, that I didn't meet them over again, but I was still working with the same people. And I guess at that 11 months, I said, well, 11 months really wasn't long enough. Let me try again. So I, decided to run for another 4 years. And then at that time, you start projects and you really want to see things that you've started, finish. So then I ran for office again, and it just kept on going.
So backing up a little bit, how from growing up in the small town, after high school, where did you go then? What was the next step?
Okay, when I got out of high school, my dad, it was like 1970. My dad says, okay, I want you to go out and get a job somewhere else. And, he had a business there, and I wanted to stay in the business and make it a family business, because it's something that he always wanted to do. And, his dad, I can remember when I was a kid, my grandfather would always have cars sitting in the yard where they lived, and he was always working on somebody's car. And my dad started doing that, and he started working at the garage, and I just decided that working on cars was something I wanted to do, and it was an opportunity to work side by side every day beside my dad and learn from him, and that's what I decided to do.
That's great. There seems to be almost two legacies you have going. There's the one of, being remembered. You'll be remembered as a political figure, and people identify you as Perry Jones is very successful in politics and local politics in Carroll County. And also this other side that is maintaining that family business. Why is it important when after you were a commissioner that you decided to go back to the gas station and the garage and keep that business going?
Well, I mean, even when I was a commissioner, when I had like weekends and evenings, had spare time, I mean, every weekend I was at the station unless there was something I had to do for the county. In the evenings, I was still there. Still got, still when I was a commissioner, would still go out on the tow truck and drive the tow trucks. And it was funny, you go out and you'd see one of the deputies or you see a state trooper or somebody, and they'll say, what are you doing driving a tow truck? I did this before I was ever a county commissioner, so I never left that. I enjoyed doing it. And it's the aspect of being able to help people. As far as going back to the garage, my mom, like I say, she's there, and my brother and I want to make sure that my mom's taken care of. We run the business, and when I started as county commissioner, my brother's son, which he was, about at that time was about 30 years old, 29 or 30, somewhere along there. He worked for a garage in Liberty Town, and he came down and worked for us also. So, we had another generation of the family that's there, and I guess it's one of those things, Union Bridge being small, you see the farms in Union Bridge that they go from generation to generation, and a lot of the people, the workforce there, same as Lehigh, goes from generation to generation, and I guess we wanted to do the same thing.
So you've kind of been able to maintain kind of being your own boss up to this point, and owning the business, and working in politics, working for the people. Do you think that's, if you were to go back and do it over again, do you think that's the kind of environment that you have to work in, that's what's best for you? Or would you kind of prefer to have a kind of quote unquote more normalcy in a job?
Well, a more normal job a lot of times is better because you have regular hours that you go to work and regular hours that you come home. When you're in this business, you go to work when people need you. And it's just like being a politician. You're there when people need you. It's not 9 to 5 job. You know, some days you may have to be there at 7 o'clock, and you know the job that I have now. You know, someone calls at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, needs a tow truck. Somebody has to be there, and it's being a public servant, whether you're in politics or whether you're in business for yourself. The kind of business I am, you are a servant of the people.
What was it like after making going from, you know, your office as a commissioner to full time at working at the station?
Well, it was I don't know. It was I guess a little bit different. You know, I was going back to the station at 7 or 7:30 in the morning compared to a lot of times. Well, and that depends on what you had to do at the county. You know, sometimes you had 7 o'clock meeting or 7:30 meetings in the county somewhere, or you had to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning to get to Annapolis by a good time in the morning, go to a meeting. So it was. I guess in a way it was a little different, because I was coming back more or less being your own boss, compared to actually, your constituents are your boss when you're in that job, So I miss it. I'm not sure that where I'm at now is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. Sometimes I get a little antsy, I want to get involved in something else. So I'm not exactly sure, exactly where I'm going to go from here.
Do you think you'll end up back in politics in the future?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things that could happen in the next year or so. There's talking about 5 commissioners by district. There's a lot of alternatives that could happen. I'm not sure I could, whether I'll get back into politics or, maybe get a government job. I don't know. It's so many prospects out there, and this past, 8 or 9 months, it's been kind of good just to try to refocus and get your mind together that what you might want to do, in the future. And I really haven't decided that yet, whether I want to get back into politics. I talk to a lot of people every day, and if they go 5 commissioners by district, there's going to be a boatload of people out there running, and the issues that are facing Carroll County today. I haven't decided whether I really want to get back into that or not. I think it's very important for people that want to get there and try to think of keeping open space in Carroll County. Preserving ag land preservation, preserving our farms. Worrying about water and sewer, what's going to happen with water in the future, but people need a place to live. Do we keep building houses on every little inch of land that we have? That's going to be a big thing in the next election that's coming up, and we're going to have people there that want to think about selling real estate and getting rich, and then we're going to have people that are out there saying, it's time to slow down on the growth and preserve some more ag land, preserve what we have, and everybody's got to eat. And if you keep putting houses on all of this stuff, we're going to have to keep importing stuff. And it's just like everything else. You look at the imports that we've gotten over the past year, with some of the meats and stuff from other countries, it hasn't been good. Your vegetables haven't been good. And it's time that we start thinking about what we can do in Maryland and throughout the United States to preserve that for ourselves, that we don't have to get imported stuff. And this is going to be big issues. And when you talk to some of these people that are, thinking about running for office, some of these people aren't thinking about that. They're thinking about, a way to get, to sell this land off and get rich, and thank God we have farmers in Carroll County that aren't just thinking about that. They want to keep farming, and they want to stay in Maryland. They want to stay in Carroll County. And I think we have to think of ways that we can preserve this ag land, and keep these farmers here, and, help out the best way we can, and worry about where we're going to get the water and what we're going to do with all the sewage that we're going to have, because that is one of the biggest problems we're going to have. And whether we're going to have enough future politicians that are going to be worrying about that, that depends on who's running, and if they really have the heart and the gut to have to come up with the hard answers and to sit down and say no to some of these developers. That's something we're really going to have to look at.
If you found yourself back into a career of politics, do you have any desire or interest in expanding that past Carroll County into Maryland state politics?
Well, I've never thought of that. I thought that, and that was a question that was asked me before, if I would think about moving up the next time in an election year or something. And like I say, I think we have enough problems right here in Carroll County, and we think we need some good, strong people to stay in Carroll County and take care of the problems here. Because when you get to the state level, and, I've been down there a lot, and, sorry to say that unless you go down there and you play taxi to a bunch of those people, and you don't get a thing done down there unless you are willing to give to them what they want. And, it's a dog-eat-dog world down there. You sit and look at, some of the bills that our legislators are putting in, and, they're putting them in every year, and they're fighting. And, you get a couple of good bills in for Carroll County every year, but, it's the D's and the R's in Annapolis and in Washington. And until the D's and the R's can forget the D's and the R's and start working together, trying to do what's right for the people, you say, what's the use down there? Because we have enough problems here in Carroll County with D's and R's, and I just feel that my position, I could do more in Carroll County than I would be at a state level.
Well, you kind of touched on it there. I want to ask, does bipartisanship really affect, do you think, government at a local level, especially in Carroll County?
It does. It does big time because, this past election, if this last several elections in Carroll County, it was strictly Republican county. Back in the 60s, early 70s, it was a Democratic county, and then now it's a Republican county. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a Republican and you listen to the right Republican people, you're going to get elected. But if you go against certain people in this county, even though you are a Republican, I'm a prime example, you don't make it. If you stand up for what is right, you're not going to be there. But it is strictly a lot of partisanship.
In politics, how would you say real can you allow yourself to be, or is there a necessary persona that you have to create when addressing the public and living a political life?
I think you have to be a person when you're in a political life. You have to be accessible to the people. You have to be honest with them, and a lot of times you make public appearances at places that you don't really want to go. Some people don't want to go. I mean, I made a lot over the years, and I can't say that I ever really made any, appearances that I didn't really want to go. I enjoyed going out. I'm a people person. I like going out to different events, meeting people, talking to people, because you always learn something new from these people. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that they just dread going to political things, or they going out into the public. And if you're going to be a politician, you have to be accessible. You have to go out to these things whether you like going or not. And that's the challenge, meeting new people. You might go out to a dinner tonight and hear some things that you don't necessarily like, but then if you get a couple of people off to the side and you get conversation going back and forth, a lot of times they'll say, well, I really didn't know that. Now I have a better understanding of that, and I know why you did what you did. And I think that's a large part of it.
So kind of in wrapping up, what would you say, are you proud, happy with how things are going and looking forward to continuing that, or are there regrets that are made and decisions that you want to change in the future, or what's your reflection on life so far, and what are you hoping for the future? Is a better way to put that.
I have no regrets of what I've done in my past, or I don't foresee anything in the future that I think is going to cripple myself or anybody else. I think, I may not have done things in my life that everybody agrees with, which is satisfactory with me. I don't do anything to hurt anybody. I do things that's that I think is satisfactory to people. And I think in the future, as far as changing things, I would just like to see Carroll County continue to be the county that it is, where people can grow and work together and have their families. The kids go to school together. They grow up, they go to college, come back to Carroll County and work instead of going other places. We have 60-some thousand people a year that go up and down the roads that are leaving Carroll County. I'd love to get some of these people to stay right in our county. That's one thing I'd love to change. Continue to work on the tech parks and things and have people work here in the county, alleviate some of the traffic on our roads, as have more open space, to continue to keep green space for the future. But other than that, I don't really know of anything that I really want to change other than that. I think it's a wonderful county to live in, and I hope it continues to stay that way.
Well, the purpose for this program is there's a large archiving factor, which we'll have this streamed on the internet for essentially as an archive for as long as that's possible to do. With that in mind, say 30, 40 years down the road, if someone were to be watching this video, what would you like them to know about yourself and the life that you lived?
I guess basically that I grew up and lived and worked all my life for the people, for my family and for the constituents of Carroll County. I think being able to work, whether you're in volunteer organizations or the fire company or a county commissioner or a mayor or county or a city council person or anything, you do it for the people that you live and work with. And I think that I hope, 30 years down the road, they'll look back and they'll say, here's a gentleman that grew up here, and when he grew up, he was a farmer. He helped on farms, and that's one thing I did. Years ago, I used to help a farmer down the road, help to make hay and fill silo and stuff, and help him in the evenings, and in the mornings I'd leave there and then come to the station and work at the garage all day, and then go back down there at nighttime. It's being able to do a variety of things, not just focus on one thing in your life, but being able to help whoever needs it. My biggest thing in life was, for years I was in the top 10 in the volunteer fire company on the ambulance, and being able to go out there and see somebody that really needed your assistance, they can say, he's did it all. He's did fire companies, he's worked on farms, he worked on cars, he was a politician, and to be able to do all this. And I think that's just wonderful, because some people just grow up and they only do one thing or two things in their life, and I think I've done it all.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones.
Well, thank you very much.